So, what keeps you coming back to Vietnam?
I love coming back to Vietnam. There's such a positive energy here, and there's so much change. And everyone here is so interested in ideas and new things.
Okay. I hope you will have a great time this year.
Thank you so much. It's good to see you.
So we start in 1911.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so it's in 1911 we were still just a small group of young people who want to share ideas with each other through books, through film.
That's great.
To understand the world, just to understand what is happening around it.
The colors are amazing.
Yeah. Do you like the color?
Like the gold.
Yeah.
I also see the universe. I keep seeing the universe.
Yeah.
Strong energy. Yeah, it looks like the painting is looking back at us.
Yeah. You see, he didn't do anything. He just put the water and then let the water go.
That's amazing.
The water and the color and just, and he just put his will very little into the product, the painting.
He's very talented.
Yeah, he has his own, his crazy idea like that.
It's like something from a dream.
Yeah. So normally, how many times a year that you visit Vietnam?
This year's special. This year I spent 5 months living in Ho Chi Minh City. And I'm still learning Hanoi. I'm still learning Ho Chi Minh City also. I still get lost all the time. And I always go back to my favorite coffee shops instead of trying new ones. I just find places I love and go back. So this year's special, I spent 5 months, January to June, in Vietnam. And this time I came back on another small fellowship, only for 3 weeks. So I'm trying to fundraise to get another chance to come back and do some more work here. So I hope to come back every year. My dream is to come back at least once a year.
Okay. Can you tell me the reason why you like our cover? Because many people say that we have a great cover, but I don't know why.
I love your covers. I love your covers for a few reasons. I love that you always include images, not just words. I mean, words are very important. And like, for example, I really love all your covers. I love this cover because you feature the author's name. Like, I like that you put the author's name in big letters so you can see who wrote the book. And you choose nice type, font. You put a lot of care. And then it often draws the reader into a scene of the book. Like this might not directly be about a scene of people creating anime, but we get a feel for the motion of anime, for what anime does, that it comes from Japan. I also love this cover because you show Professor White has done so much research for this book. And she went to many different kinds of coffee shops. So this is showing the different kinds of places that she visited in the book. I hope you show this to her. She will be very happy.
And also the V60 is a Japanese invention.
Yes.
The V60 filter.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we need to teach Americans how to make coffee. So apologies to Americans. And of course, I like this cover because it's such a simple title about ramen, but it really catches our eye and we know exactly what the book is about. Plus it makes us hungry.
Yeah. Thank you. So do you plan to come back to Vietnam soon?
I would love to. My relationship with Vietnam is just beginning. And I'm really grateful to colleagues in Vietnam, Japan, and the US for encouraging me to study Vietnam. The reason I came here is I got to know young professors from Vietnam who were getting fellowships to earn degrees in the US and Japan, or at least get some mentorship training. And I wanted to work with them more. And I'm so grateful to Fulbright and for the chance to be here.
How many books have you written so far?
I have written 7 books.
7 books, and what are they about?
Thank you for asking. My first book when I was a student was a translation of my favorite novel, novel by Kawabata Yasunari. But to go backward, my recent books, I published a book called Japan on American TV, which is looking at a history of how America has represented ideas of Japan in comedy programs. Because I think there's a lot of truth behind jokes.
So have you read this book?
In English.
Yes.
I've read it in English.
And what do you like most about it?
I like how she combines culture and interviews. Professor White, she goes by the name Corky, has a very good sensibility for culture and people. And I like how she combines both. And she herself loves food, and she was a chef. So she has a very good sense of how food is made. I also like how she organizes her ideas and takes us on a journey through the cafes in Tokyo. This is a really lovely book. And she always puts herself, her stories, in her book. And I love it. It makes it more compelling. I feel like I'm in Tokyo with her, having a good cup of coffee. I think a good book that I would like to read too would be about cafes in Vietnam. Mm-hmm. Like a version of Professor White's book
yes.
about coffee culture in Vietnam.
Yes. It would be great if some Vietnamese scholar who live here and do some research about different restaurants, different cafeteria, and then do research about the history of the Vietnamese coffee.
Oh, I would love to read that book.
Because, you know, Vietnam had a long history of the coffee since the colonial times. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, in the before the Đổi Mới and after Đổi Mới, and, you know, it changed so dramatically. Just, so this is like our showcase here. We have a lot of books here also for the people to come to read.
This is great. Yeah. As you know, I love this book.
Also?
Yes. And we talked about this book before.
Yes. But what can you tell us about Ian Country?
Ian Country is another cultural anthropologist, and Dr. Condry interviews people that are in the industry. So many people study fans, but Dr. Condry, yes, he's interested in fans, but he likes what goes on behind the scenes, how anime is created, how manga comes to be. So when I read his books, I learn how things are made and the people who make them. Oh. And he writes so well.
Wow. Well. Many people like the book a lot.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad. This is one of the first books in any language about anime. So this has become very important in Japanese studies.
So like a fundamental.
Yes.
Like
and he's also very philosophical too in the same way. He likes theories.
What is a cultural anthropologist?
Thank you for asking. A cultural anthropologist is, to the best of my understanding, I'm not a cultural anthropologist. I'm a cultural anthropologist fangirl, enthusiast. But cultural anthropologists, the way I understand it, study how culture and people interact, the role that culture has in affecting people's lives. So instead of looking like a linguistic anthropologist might look at the words more, Corky in this book looks at the culture of coffee and how the culture of coffee is created by people and also helps create people.
How many cultural anthropologists do you have in the US?
That's a great question. I don't know the quantity, the number, but every year there's more books published. So there's lots to translate about many different things. For example, there's a strong interest in anime manga, video games, also in food, ramen especially, coffee, tea, lots of things that we don't often think about too, like fast food, convenience stores. I think maybe every year, if I had to guess, probably like 40, 50 cultural anthropologists earn their graduate degrees.
Wow.
So many, many.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a big field.
But do you know when it all started with cultural anthropology?
That's a really great question.
In the US?
I think the field of anthropology began to develop, especially in the 1950s. But I would need to check with an anthropologist to be sure. Before the war, before the Second World War, anthropology was a different field about Japan. Or anthropologists have changed how they study. Like at my university, at the University of Oregon, we're very lucky to have the collection of a famous anthropologist named Frederick Starr, S-T-A-R-R. And Dr. Starr, Professor Starr, studied Japan, but he did it in a very old-fashioned way. He wore kimono, he went into Japanese groups, he tried to embed himself in the society. But he also took people from Asia, like the Philippines and Japan, to the US, especially the Philippines, to be human exhibits. Fortunately, we don't do that anymore. But he also, for my university, he collected, when you go to Japan, if you go to the shrines, on the ceiling of the shrines are many pieces of paper with beautiful writing. And he collected them, special ones that people would make to trade with each other. They're called. Vietnam is the loudest place I have lived.
Yes.
It's a good energy, but it surprised me a lot how loud Vietnam is.
And many Vietnamese people have problem with the stomach because of the noise.
Oh.
You know, because the noise it make your mind cannot tranquil. So and then the mind and the gut connection. So it make your stomach going crazy.
Oh, that's so interesting. How do you eat good food to help it, or find a quiet space?
You have to combine everything because there is no simple solution. For example, you need to get away from the noise as much as possible. But if you cannot, you need to use some medicine to deal with the axis.
Yeah.
Because when your stomach get crazy, it will produce too much acid.
When someone's on their phone in the United States, they listen to headphones.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I went to listen to my podcast, I put on my headphones. But in Vietnam, people just watch and the noise plays.
Yes, that's also very common.
Oh.
Because in Vietnam, they haven't really value or consider about individualism.
Yeah.
So it's still a long way to introduce people about philosophy, about other types of living, about oneness and about otherness.
Yes.
Yeah. On the other, looking from other perspective, the Vietnamese people, they kind of proud with that culture. Because for them it's like friendly and being open, helping each other in the time of need.
It's very. When I talk with friends from Vietnam who go to Japan, they often say to me that they find Japan very cold. Yeah. Not weather cold, but emotionally cold.
Something like that.
Like here, people are like, when I first arrived in Vietnam, I did not know how to cross the street. Mm-hmm. All the motorbikes, I was too scared. But a few times, someone would take me by the arm and help me cross the street.
Yes. Very open.
Yeah. Vietnam seems to be changing so quickly.
Yes, very quickly. Especially politically, in the past few years, very dramatically. So I hope that economically and culturally are.
And I'm glad that many people are reading books here and gaining ideas through books.
Yes.
Just walking around, I see more bookstores and more publishers than I do in the United States or Japan. And we just had the event on Doraemon, or Doraemon, and instead of featuring merchandise or mascots, it featured books, the manga books.
Can you share with me about the process of a book to be published?
Thank you for asking. I just this year and last year published 3 books. And the process might be different from Vietnam, but for publishing like an academic book, the kind of wonderful books that you translate at Book Hunter, we build relationships with presses. Like I like to work with an editor more than once so that we know each other's communication style. So first I contact an editor that I know, and I propose an idea. and then I write a proposal where I go into more detail about the idea. I write, for example, a couple pages about why the book is important and what kind of change it will help bring about, who the audience will be, how many pages the book will have, when I'll finish writing it, and I always run late. And after I send the proposal to the press sends, reviews the proposal and decides, yes, we want to move forward with this book. Or maybe, but we need some more information, then I'll send them another chapter of the book. Or the worst answer, no thank you. Then I cry.
Oh.
No. Then I try a different press. But once the proposal's accepted, I work on the manuscript and get it into good condition to submit to the editor. And then the editor sends that to two experts in the field, like Professor White or Professor Kanji. And they give their expert opinions about whether the book should be published or not. And hopefully they say yes.
Wow.
But usually I have to make changes. Like most cases the reviewers will say yes, publish, but please change a few things. Write a better introduction. Make the book shorter.
Okay.
Different things. And then I spend more months writing the book.
Okay.
And then finally email it to the press. And then it goes through a few different stages of copy editing and proofreading, and then proofs. And then we choose a cover. And I often ask my students for their advice about covers. And I love your covers for Book Hunter. And then it gets published and we have a party.
Okay. We mostly, so we have translated books and then book written by Vietnamese author. So translated books is quite simple.
Oh.
Because when I acquire the rights from international publisher, I will get a translator to work on the manuscript.
Wow.
And when it's done, I will have some editor to review and then fix all the errors and then submit it to a publisher.
Wow.
And then when we get permission, we can publish the books.
Wow.
And it's quite simple. But when there are some topics that are too much sensitive, it will be difficult.
Yes.
And for the book written by Vietnamese author, it's quite simple because mostly when some authors they submit the manuscript to us, we read the manuscript, and then if we find it interesting and there are potential readership, we will just sign a contract with them and publish the book.
Oh, wow.
It's a simple process. Just go to like an editor to make their own typo or wrong typing disappear, and then get some permission, official permission, and then get printed.
Nice.
And then of course we will have some party also, some book seminar.
Please invite me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I heard that you have a small community of cultural anthropologists in the US, and can you tell me your group? How many people are there?
Thank you for asking. One of my favorite things about my job is discussing ideas with other people. And I really enjoy going to conferences and book events because we can talk about ideas and talk about our research. So our community has grown very large and very diverse. For example, I worked with Professor White on a project recently on women's stories, where Professor White wrote her own story. She has a fascinating life, and she came to Asia in the 1960s and spent time, after she graduated college, she traveled around the world and had many experiences. So through our community, we got about 33 people together and decided that in addition to doing research, they would tell their stories. These are all women who are above the age of 75, 85. The oldest is 103. So that's one of my communities, this community of women who helped form Japanese studies. And many of them are cultural anthropologists. One is a medical anthropologist who began studying Japan in the 1960s. Her name is Dr. Margaret Locke. Other communities is the pop culture community, and that's a growing community. In numbers, I think that's maybe the one that's growing the fastest, because we all love pop culture. So we get together like Professor Condry, and at conferences we work on projects together, we do books together. So wow, if I had to count, maybe there's like more than 100 in that community.
Wow.
Yes. Very large, and a lot of students, a lot of students. Every year, new students want to become professors. So my school gets maybe 60 applications for people who want to study Japan, study anthropology, study stories.
Okay, and how do you help each other out?
It's another great question. How do we help each other out? We help each other in many ways. For example, I just went to a conference in London organized by a colleague who, instead of having us talk online, he thought it would be a great idea for everybody to come to the British Museum and share papers and ideas together. So he raised money, and he and another collaborator, two of them, Rosina and Oleg, got people together for a conference. So one way we help each other is by organizing events, fundraising to support each other's works. Also, sometimes when I'm starting a project, I'll contact my friends and I'll ask them, like, do you think this is a good idea? Should I go forward with this? What do you think? And they're usually very honest with me, and they make suggestions. Another way we help each other is when we need, like for example, we need a letter of introduction to go to a school or to join a research group, we help each other. And the one last way, we are always growing our community, and that's the other way we help each other, by encouraging diverse voices and new people to come.
Sounds very great.
No, thank you, you should come.
Yes.
I admire your community.
I hope to build some sort of similar community in Vietnam, because we have many topics to discover.
Yes.
And about your community, about cultural anthropology in the US, can you tell me what are the topics that get the most interested?
Oh, that's a really good question. I'll have to answer as a teacher and reader rather than as a specialist or an editor. I keep noticing that certain topics are often always popular. Like, people love to read about food, and many books about food continue to be published. Two topics that are growing in recent years is popular culture is one. Years ago, popular culture was not a field, in part because after someone reads like a manga book, they throw it away. So we didn't have really archives or libraries of popular culture until a few decades ago, until thanks to cultural anthropologists and cultural studies people. So popular culture is growing. Another field that's growing is transnational studies, like comparing US, Vietnam, and Japan. There's a lot of interest in how culture and people connect the world. And that's my own personal interest. I'm very interested in how culture and people move across countries. The third area I think that's growing a lot is gender. There's a lot of interest in not just sort of classical gender studies, like looking at the roles of men and women, but looking at how people negotiate the different parts of their gender identities in very creative ways, and paying attention to things that people didn't talk about years ago.
Okay, so I'm the most interested in topics?
Yeah. So I think, to summarize, some topics that are getting a lot of interest right now are transnational studies, gender studies, popular culture studies, and also things that are part of our daily life, like food, history, culture. We're also very interested, I'm trying to think what books I've bought this year. My own interests, I'm very interested in personal stories. Not when people gossip, but for example, when people talk about how they became things, like how they came to become a cultural anthropologist, or how they discovered a new part of their life. So I think there's a growing interest right now in the United States of taking personal stories very seriously. What we call personal stories is cultural production. But some of the most innovative books I've seen, books that make us see something differently, like take something very for granted like coffee that we drink all the time, and writing sort of a cultural anthropology of how coffee has become important to daily life in Japan. Or a book I would love to write is how characters like Doraemon, Doraemon, or in America Snoopy, or in Vietnam we see so many different, like Doraemon is so popular here, Doraemon, how they take on different parts of life, how they become parts of people's daily life in different countries.
Okay. And do you know George Salt?
I have never read it. I'm a fan of this book. This is a very helpful book. And of course, I love ramen. So when I read this book, I get very hungry. Yeah, this is another very important study about a food that needs to be taken more seriously in Japan. When you go to Tokyo, there are some very famous ramen shops, and people will stand in line for hours to get a good bowl of ramen. Me too. So when I read this book, I learn a lot about ramen, not just what it tastes like, where it came from. I learned the culture of ramen, the people who make ramen, and its importance in Japan and abroad. I'm glad you translated this.
That's the first one of the series, yes.
Wow. It makes me so hungry. Like, it looks so good.
Have you got any bowl of ramen this time you came to Hanoi?
No, but I have a long stopover. I'm transiting through Tokyo, so I will get in line for a ramen shop.
Sure, sure.
I'm very happy about the books. As a reader and a teacher and a scholar, I admire your choices of books.
Thank you.
You have a very good eye.
I think working on Aristotle and some other philosopher, it helped me to quickly notice what is essence, what is the most important, and among many things.
Yeah, philosophy and critical theory are helpful tools.
Yes,
I believe.
I think it's very useful. Practical for everyone to carry on in our daily life.
So that's a very good point.
How much does it cost for an author to do all the research and to make a book like this or like this or like this?
That is a really good question. The answer, not to be too broad, but the answer is a lot. That's why I rely on groups like Fulbright Japan Foundation, because I could not do it. Especially me, I teach at a public university.
Yes.
So not only do I need money, I also need time.
Yes.
Because I need some time from away from my classes. I love my students, but I also need some time to do my research.
Yes.
So it maybe takes, for these books, like for example, for Professor White's book, she had to travel to Japan and then spend a lot of time learning about which cafes she wanted to visit and then make the connections with people. So it took a lot of visits. I can imagine a lot of time, a lot of money. So when I get a grant from a government grant, it usually covers, for example, the flights and tuition at a university if I need to work there, or costs, but it also opens doors, like without the name of the fellowship, or with the name of the fellowship, more doors open. Like if I'm part of an organization, people are more willing to talk with me, I think.
Okay. So roughly, does this around 100,000 US dollar?
Probably something like that. I would guess I could ask her. I would guess it would be something like that.
And it takes like a year.
More than that.
More than
yeah, more than
2 years?
Maybe. It seems like my projects always take me longer than they should.
Yeah. But of course, when you get older, you can do a book quicker, right?
It's
like
true.
More faster because you have all the ingredients, all the knowledge and experiences in your head already.
That's so true. When I was a student, my very first book was a translation of a novel by Kawabata Yasunari. It was called The Scarlet Gang of Asakusa, and I translated it when I was a student. My first book based on my research took me a very long time, years. But it's true, once you learn how to research, how to write more effectively, it gets shorter.